Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode 229 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, co-founder, CEO here at Thoughtium, and I am your very excited host for today's episode. I feel like I've been out of the host seat for a bit here, but that's because we've just had so many great discussions being brought to you by other members of the Thoughtium team, and that really has been an exciting part of the evolution of this platform. Navigating Now is designed specifically to bring you leaders and leadership topics that matter most. We go live every Wednesday or every Thursday, at 3 p.m. Central. You can find today's episode and every episode at thoughtteam.com/live. And today's episode is all about unlocking high performance in tech teams. You know, the Thoughtium team here over the course of the last several years has been really expanding the work that we do. We started predominantly in the life sciences and financial services industry. And over the course of the last really 2 or 3 years, we've expanded to different corners of different industries. And technology has been one of them. We work with a handful of predominant tech companies that are looking to grow and scale leadership within those that are, well-established Fortune 50 organizations to your scrappy startups. All have a very similar focus in making sure that they attract, retain, and develop their best talent. And to help us in this conversation today for episode 229, we have a special leader here at the table. We're going to be bringing him forward here in just a moment. His name is Ashraf Jahangeer. He is the former VP of engineering at EasyPost, and he's also played leadership positions in tech teams over the course of the last 20 years. And we're going to be focused on Ashraf's practitionership in developing and growing talent within these organizations. Ashraf, great to have you at the table.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for that very nice and kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to kind of begin things with a little bit of a tie back to maybe your origin story. So, you've been a leader in the tech space over the course of the last 20 years. I want you to think even further back to maybe when you were growing up or as you were developing yourself as a human. What's one memory that you have as a childhood that would point towards the work that you love to do today?
It's great you mentioned that. I would say one of the early memories that I have of my childhood and how I really thought I could do this leadership is when I would arrange and make sure my friends were having a good time in my playground, right? Like we go in the evenings, we'll just go out and I just realized that everybody needs a leader, right? So by
Yeah.
default, I'll just become the leader. I'll just set teams and I'll say, hey, let's play this today, and let's like make the rules and change the rules today to make the game more interesting. So I would say that was my earliest introduction to leadership.
I love that. Like, it's such a simple but very real anecdote from your childhood. And I was the same one. And I don't know like how you get anointed as kind of like the ringleader of your groups. Maybe it's because you're more organized. Maybe it's because, you're the one that's proactive about bringing people together. But that role tends to stick with you over life. And that is probably a large part of why you've chosen your career path.
Yeah, absolutely. And people love to be told what to do, right?
Yeah,
That's how,
right.
that's how, yeah. So if they are great, if somebody delegates that, somebody takes that on and really tells them how to have a good time. So I've just kept on doing it, I believe.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's dive in. The topic today is growing and scaling leadership within tech firms, and I want to maybe start there. We have a lot of leaders that are a part of emerging or growing organizations, and maybe they're taking a team from 10 or 20 to potentially over 100 or beyond, and that's happening quicker today than it ever has before. Thoughtium itself has gone through quite a few growth spurts over the last 12 to 18 months. And one of the challenges that I think these growing organizations have are like, how do you scale great talent? How do you scale the culture that you've built as a small organization in enabling your leaders, in supporting them, training them, ensuring that, they're driving success for the org and also building great teams. And how do you take that to like bigger scale? So I know there's a big topic, but maybe we'll just start there. Your experience, Ashraf, in scaling leaders within these tech firms. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. As I said, I've spent, and you mentioned, I've spent over 20 years in this industry, and of those 15 have been like leading tech teams, especially with early growth startups and high growth companies. And as you know, you just mentioned, you all are pivoting more into the tech organizations, and this has become more and more critical for the tech orgs. We have seen how the industry has evolved over the last 25, 30 years. It's so fast, orgs grow so fast. So a very important skill for a leader, a technical leader, is how to change your role as the company grows, and how to then become a leader who is able to grow teams under you, right?
Mm,
So the way I think about all of this is, what is the life cycle of a software professional in a tech company? Let's start from there. So
mm,
basically, you get hired, you get onboarded, and then you start to add value to the company's business, right? Through technical coding or anything for that matter, right? So as a leader, you have to start to look at the whole life cycle and say, how can I make the whole life cycle efficient and fun? So you start, the
mhm,
first thing you should always look at as tech leader, and when you're, especially when you're trying to scale an organization, is your hiring. How is your hiring happening? Who are the leaders on the hiring? How can you make that process more efficient? So I would give you a very simple example. A lot of tech teams, when they grow, they hire senior engineers or staff engineers on their teams, and eventually what happens is these teams start to have their own processes while hiring them, right? And that's very, very expensive. So as a leader, you can start to say, hey, you know what, can you create a common pipeline for engineers that that reduces your overhead? So very simple example, but something that you can do. The other thing is, you also should spend time in training the leaders. Not everybody is trained to make quick judgment calls in 45-minute interviews to get the best and say, is this person the right person on my team, right? So you have to have that training aspect. You have to have some SLAs around what how much time do you want your candidates to spend in your pipeline. So those are just some very, very basic things
yeah.
to smoothen up your hiring. You get into the second step, and you have to build a very smooth onboarding process, because you got these professionals on your team. They have to have a very good impression of your company, because they'll carry it, right? And so you build your onboarding process so they become productive very soon, and then you move into like, how do you maximize the life cycle at your company in your team? So for that, you build the right kind of performance rubrics, promotions, calibrations, how to reward them, how to make them happy and grow with you in your company over the longer and longer. It's better for you. So that's your life cycle. As leaders, you also have to start to think of how to scale up your own team, because as the teams are growing, the leaders on your teams are getting more and more responsibility. So you start to have some training programs. So that's where, like, organizations like Thotium come into picture. It's like, it's great, so that you can come in and train leaders to scale up and take on more responsibility. So I would say, looking at the life cycle, smoothing out of the life cycle, making sure it's efficient, and training up and upskilling your leaders. And as a leader, you have to be on it all the time. Your job
Mhm.
doesn't
Yeah.
stop setting this process up, and you'll
Mhm.
have to be on the on top of this all the time.
Yeah, I love that. A couple things that I'll add, and I love this idea of like looking at the whole life cycle, because I think sometimes we approach talent development on kind of like the bookends, like how do you successfully onboard folks, and how do you potentially manage performance or potentially manage them out. But there's a lot in that retention focus that we have in kind of the middle of that life cycle. A couple of litmus tests that we like to bring to our clients around this kind of employee life cycle. If you are an established organization and your onboarding program is more of a checklist, then you've got to start to think about how you can expand opportunities to onboard folks more effectively, particularly leaders. And there's some very organic ways that you can bring more formal structure and process and make your onboarding more multidimensional without spending a ton of your budget. So that's one litmus test that we like to bring to our clients is, hey, if you're 2 or 3 years in and your organization is growing and scaling, and your onboarding program is a checklist of people to go and visit and conversations to have, you really should think about a more robust onboarding program. Secondly, the second litmus that I would just layer on, Ashraf, to your best practices is ongoing development and upskilling. If ongoing development and upskilling is more the flavor of the day, or it's spot coaching with folks that are raising their hands or screaming the loudest, you've got to think about more standard ways of upskilling and onboarding. Not everybody is going to proactively elect to take ongoing training, but that doesn't mean that everybody doesn't need it or doesn't want it. So offering opportunities for folks on an ongoing basis to upskill is a huge focus of a lot of our organizations that are scaling. And this is all, structure and process that you've got to put in place. And you do not have to wait until you have a fully built out organization. You can do that from the jump. So just a couple of kind of additional nuggets. And as we think about developing people within tech organizations, Ashraf, I want to move a little bit to kind of the way that we lead blended teams, right? So how do we successfully blend teams together? Teams that are bringing on new talent, or potentially you're going through a merger and acquisition. We have a lot of organizations that are going through change. How do we ensure that we are offering the best possible support and development of our folks for blended teams? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony, as in this industry, there's a lot of change happening, right? Which means that
Yeah.
you see mergers and acquisitions and companies and products merging together. So I'll talk a little bit about, since I've had a lot of experience with teams that were acquired, or being on both sides of the table. One thing, from a thought process perspective, is very important in cases of mergers and acquisitions, is the idea that there are two teams and two products and two systems coming together, and those two coming together create a single, much larger, stronger unit than they were individually. I think that's a key mind
Mm.
shift change that helps a lot, because in a lot of times I've seen in acquisitions, the larger company usually takes on a broader, more dominant role. And what happens is that does not create a really good
Mm.
feeling in the smaller company, right?
Yeah.
So I've always approached the acquisitions from that perspective, is like, how can we get together and make something better that we couldn't have done by ourselves, right? So in my mind, the first step always has to be learning, right? So when I get a new team like that, I spend the first few weeks in learning. It's not only learning their processes, but their systems, their culture, and how did they get formed, and what systems would they maintain, and how are they really going to contribute to our success. And then similarly, I also have my own team impart the learning back to them, so they should learn as much as possible
Mm.
about us, right? And so in the first few weeks or months, spending a lot of time in learning about each other creates a very solid foundation. At the same time, you have to start envisioning of what those two teams and the combination of that products can do for the markets. How can both of us, our teams and our products, could grow? So that foundation helps a lot. The
Mm.
other thing, I always do in these, is like figure out who are the key stakeholders and players in that the other company or the other product, and really work on making sure we can retain them as much as possible, making sure they are excited. Because if you think about it, right, most of the times in acquisitions, folks are a little insecure as to what their
Right.
future would be. They are approached by recruiters and all of that, and now they are a part of your team. So how do you make their lives more comfortable,
Mm.
right? How do you make sure they don't run away? Because most of it is about people, right? You get the systems and all, but you get the knowledge and the people, you want to retain them. And then the final point I'd mention is, work on making success quick, right? Don't work on long term and year long integrations and successes stories
Mm.
that are always on slide decks and thought processes. Make clear and quick adjustments, make them successful very quickly, within a quarter if possible. And then once you have that base and foundation set up, then you can start thinking of integrations and mergers and systems and processes that always in my mind should come later.
I love that. Your last point's such a good one. I think about, so many of our client organizations and even peers of mine that, are going through significant change in their organization, and they're 12 or 18 months into the change, and they're still talking about, the burden of going through the shift, and kind of, anticipating this point in time when they're going to be through the change. And the truth of the matter is, you've got to be able to sharpen your focus, and you've got to be able to identify some of those quick wins that are happening within the first even 6 months of a merger and acquisition. You've got to be able to, celebrate those. And I think the second point that I'll make, and it goes back to, something that you said earlier. Uh, yes, as leaders, our folks are looking to us to guide them through the change. But one of the most potent things you could do, especially for two groups that are coming together, whether it's two different organizations or two different teams, is have those teams meet with each other, collaborate, share best practices, even share stories of, their legacy organization and what allowed them to succeed. And that will speed the time it takes for, teams to blend, which will allow teams then to solve bigger problems a lot sooner and not get caught in this kind of holding pattern that we see a lot of organizations going through change. And it's almost like they're paralyzed years into the shift. So just some great tips in terms of, helping organizations that are scaling or on a growth trajectory or even a change trajectory. The last topic that I want to touch on and spend maybe even a little bit more time on is one that, I'm really, really passionate about. We are, as leaders, our job is to, help folks step into roles that maybe they're not super comfortable stepping into, or they might not have experience in. And leading within a tech organization, Ashraf, I know you have examples of situations where you've got a leader who's extremely technically sound. They're a technical leader. They're an engineer by trade. They've maybe managed, large projects or initiatives and some teams, but you're asking them to really step into a people leadership role in ways that they haven't before. And I'm curious, how do we enable or challenge those technical leaders to become better people leaders?
That's a great question, and a very, very natural question, right? Even I started my career as an engineer, writing lots of code over like first few years of my career, and then transitioned into management, and then I've not looked back since then. Um, so and as the team grows, you're not going to hire everybody from outside. There'll be like lots of good folks on your team that you may want to promote them and help them grow in their careers. They want to become people leaders and so on. So you have, as a leader, you have to develop the skill to actually develop the leaders on your team. So that's very, very important for any leader that is growing, and that is across the board, right?
Yeah.
So from a tech perspective, the way I started to learn about it, and the way I say the first step is a mind shift change,
Mm.
right? So when you are an engineer, when you are an individual contributor, your success is your own code. You can do it within a week,
Mm.
within days, and you clearly see an impact very quickly because you've done something very quickly, and then you are very happy because everybody is like praising you, right? And that
Mm.
gives you instant gratification. And so, but when you are trying to transition into a people leader or a team leader, that mind shift has to completely change to say, I am going to make others empowered and capable to do all of that. So in
Mm.
the, that has to start to happen. And some don't, right? Like I've worked with technical leaders who have wanted to become people leaders, and in some months, or say, come back and say, no, this is not for me, I just want to go back and
Yeah.
do more and more technical things at a bigger level. But the mind shift change is the most hard, and
Mm.
I went through some failures in the beginning to actually do that as well, because what you tend to do as leaders is try to solve the problem by yourselves immediately because you've done it before, versus trying to grow your team. And so you start to learn how to grow your team. So that's the first aspect of mind shifting. And then I would say the next aspect is everybody needs that coaching, because somehow there's a misconception in the industry that you do not need managers to be trained. There's tons
Mm.
and tons of like technical training available for everybody, very few management training, very few people are just expected to manage, which
Yeah.
is, I feel, a mistake.
Yeah.
So as a leader, I double down on coaching the managers or would be managers. I set them up for success, because the skills that they need in this role, like high EQ, understanding how to lead under pressure, and coaching others, and budgets, and one-on-ones and performance reviews, is a totally different skill set. So they need to be continuously trained to do, in order to do that. And this isn't just an ongoing journey. So I'll just pause there to see what other thoughts you have on that.
No, that's great. I just, again, continued words of wisdom and nuggets to think about. In this case, something that sticks out that I'm hearing you say is this focus on mindset. All of our leadership development programming here at Thoughtium is made of really three components: the mindset, the skill set, and the tool set of today's leader. And in so many cases, even some of the most experienced leaders that we work with, it's the mindset is the piece that's either missing or the one that maybe is underdeveloped or not paid attention to at all. Because we are so quick to either develop very specific skills like having difficult conversations, managing up, coaching. We have a lot of tools in our bag, whether that's coaching frameworks or different discussion scenarios that we can use. It's the mindset piece that is a little bit more abstract, but in my opinion, the most important. For a leader to truly step into the mindset of being able to lead and guide teams, that impacts their every action, their every move, and their every interaction. So when you have the mindset of a people leader, that permeates everything you do. It's not excluded to a coaching conversation or a one-on-one that you're having with your team. And I think that's where the true leaders are seen and felt, is outside of kind of the formal one-on-one dialogue that we have with our folks. It's in the way that we navigate the organization. It's in some of the conversations that happen after the one-on-one or in the hallways, or as a leader, sometimes you just get the sense that new conversations need to happen. That is all a mindset. So even our people leaders here at Thoughtium, I'm constantly encouraging them to take on more of a mindset. And that means like really taking a look at the way that you're engaging in everyday conversations, the way that you are leading project meetings, the way that you're handling folks one-on-one. And so I love that concept of the mindset. Do you have any further thoughts on how leaders can develop more of a mindset of enabling, others?
Yeah, so I would say start small. And
Yeah.
in all cases, I would always suggest having a mentor with you. Like,
Yeah.
I would not suggest trying to do it on your own. Have a mentor, and even they are not your direct manager, there are a lot of folks that are really good in the organization. Reach out to mentors and start small. So the way I at least handle this is, when I see that potential, or if somebody comes to me and say I want to do this, I start small and give them small proof of concept initiatives and say, hey, there's this small project that is out there. You have to work with these two mid-level or junior engineers. Why don't you take the complete ownership of that, and here's your goals and deliverables, and see if you can do it. Number one, if you can do it. Number two, if you enjoy doing it. And number three, if the other two engineers enjoy you doing it. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
all those three things are very important for you to start to really, you know get an idea of whether this is for you or not. And once you start small and you start to like it, then incrementally increase the responsibility. So I would say, get a mentor and talk to them about what small opportunities do you have to start to showcase, and really understand that this is for you.
I love that. I'll add one thing. You're inspiring me to think about, what are everyday ways that we can enable more of a leadership mindset in our folks. One of the things that's working a lot for us is a focus on verbalization, and I'll describe that here in a moment. As leaders, oftentimes we go through these programs and we learn how to handle tricky situations, how to have the difficult conversations, et cetera. But we're not actually translating that into how would that show up in a conversation with this person. And this is where maybe we get caught in some of the theory and some of the content, and we're not actually putting it into practice. So there are so many times when we're in a leadership meeting and we're working on some of these skills that we will pause and we'll say, what would that sound like when you're having a conversation with this person who's underperforming, and you've got to have that conversation at the end of the quarter? How would you open that conversation? And that is so different than, how would you handle this? What tools might you bring? What frameworks would you bring? That's really easy, but it's in the moment, like being able to open those conversations and have the conversations. From in my opinion, and from my experience, is oftentimes the piece that's missing. So a real focus on practical application of this mindset can be achieved through practicing verbalization. That's at the heart of so much of our training here at Thought Team.
Absolutely. And the communication becomes so much more important as a leader, how you communicate, because
Yeah.
these are sensitive situations. Even to just, start a meeting and talk to somebody and say, hey, what's going on? I don't feel you are performing. It's very hard, believe
It's
me.
tough.
The first
Yeah.
time you tell that to somebody on their face, it's very hard. But
Yeah.
you have, and that's why I was saying you practice it with your mentor, or even your, at home with somebody, like in front of a mirror, if not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But try to practice these discussions because they are tough.
Yeah, I love that. Ashraf, thank you so much for your insights today. I feel like we're maybe just scratching the surface, and your practitionership in leading and scaling teams is clearly coming through in today's conversation. We love to define the term practitionership as treating your work like an art form or a craft, and it's really special when we get to talk to leaders whose art form or craft is building, scaling, and enabling others. And I can tell that that's really at the heart of what you do. So thank you. We'd love to close things out with a quick lightning round. It's kind of a custom here in Navigating Now to allow our community to get to know you a little bit better. Are you game?
Absolutely, I'm ready.
Okay, and I'm gonna go like off the cuff on this one. I'm just feeling creative. Uh, what are you reading, watching, or listening to today that you're really geeking out about? And it does not have to do with work.
Oh, I'm just reading everything about what's going on in AI, and it's like an ongoing. You have to be up to date because every day there's something happening. So
Yeah.
I'm really like excited about what AI is bringing today to the tech industry and across the industries in general.
If you had a group of people leaders in front of you today, and they're all just as focused, excited / concerned about the role that AI would play, what's the one thing that you would have them do this weekend to get closer to the opportunity of AI?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I would say start to look at how AI can help them grow their business.
Mm,
Start to brainstorm of like what's coming next, because today everything seems so bleak with a lot going on around you. But I've seen like four such bleaks in the last 20 years or so.
mhm.
I know there's always going to be a silver lining. There's going to be an upswing. So how do we get ready for that upswing? What are we doing today? So we can brainstorm that. That'll be an amazing conversation.
I love that. How would you describe your people leadership in 5 words or less?
I would say I'm a great executioner. I understand
Ooh,
business strategy, and I'm able to build teams that can translate that strategy into execution.
I love that. There's very few people leaders that would describe themselves as a great executionist, and I've always argued that the best leaders are the ones that can get on stage in front of everybody and show the organization the future, and get in any conference room in the organization and be dangerous enough to add value. Those are the leaders, and I've been fortunate to work for a few of them at the highest levels of organization that I believe are the most dangerous. And there's a certain sense of execution. We call it the clouds and the dirt,
Yeah.
and we play in both of them. I love that. Last question for you, Ashraf. I want you to think about one word to describe something that you really admire about yourself, and I want you to finish this sentence. If the world were a lot more like Ashraf, it would be blank.
It will be more practical.
Ooh, another good answer. I usually don't ask, tell me more, but I need to know more about this.
I feel I look at everything from a very practical aspect first,
Yeah.
and I'm a very goal focused person, and that's why I talked about execution. I look at strategy, I look at business, and I say what is the most practical, most efficient way to solve this problem. So my wife keeps telling me stop being so practical even in at home. So that came to my mind first.
I love that. I think the world needs more practicality, and I know a lot of organizations do as well too. So, Ashraf, thank you so much again for joining this episode, and we look forward to having you a part of the Navigating Now community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It was
All
wonderful.
right. All right. We want to thank Ashraf for joining this episode 229 of the Thought Team Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. It's so good to be back in the host seat. At the same time, I'm super proud of the fact that you'll probably only see me here once every 4 or 6 weeks. Our team is just so thrilled to lead this dialogue and bring new people to the table, and hopefully that's what some of our regular viewers and listeners have seen is this, diversity of thought expertise that we've brought to the table on a week-to-week basis. A lot of focus these days on people, a lot of focus these days on change. These are two topics that you can find a lot of content on at our new website, thougtium.com. All of the episodes here, which are searchable, all of them have categories that you can search for and are tagged, can be found at thoughtteam.com/live. So we'd love for you to check out the new catalog of Navigating Now episodes that are a lot more searchable. And we hope that you take advantage of that resource. We go live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. Super excited to see you all next week. Until then, so long and have a great weekend.